The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
Whoops, what did I do? Sound just, what happened there? Oh, I pressed pause. That'll do it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday night. I hope you had a great weekend and you're having fun at on a Monday. Monday's great. Monday's the beginning of the work week, and it is a lot of fun. All right. So I'm pretty pissed off today. So today should be an interesting show because a few things make me as angry as the video I'm about to show you has made me. So yesterday, I analyzed Mark Cuban's pathetic defense of capitalism, and then I spent a little time with Richard Wolff, who is a Marxist and who is both ignorant and dumb at the same time, a combination of the both. And, it pisses me off how stupid, ignorant, dumb, Marxist people like that, anybody listens to, never mind the millions of people who listen to him or the hundreds of thousands of people who listen to him. And that really, it really ticks me off. And I laid into him yesterday about banks, a topic he discussed and knows obviously nothing about, but then he knows nothing about economics, and he is an economist. But there's something that pisses me off more than Marxists who don't know anything and who attack capitalism, and that is so-called conservatives who pretend to be pro-markets, who sometimes present themselves as pro-markets, and who present themselves, even worse, as the purveyors of truth. They accuse everybody else of fake news, of leftist bias, of the New York Times distorting the facts. And oh my God, Tucker Carlson outdoes himself in the next clip. Not only does he reveal himself as a fake news, biased distorter of reality, he presents a leftist argument that has been given for decades, all under the banner of Fox News, all to attack one of the preeminent capitalists of our time, and a huge supporter of the Republican Party, huge donor to the Republican Party. But there's a reason why this particular Republican is going to be decapitated by Tucker Carlson, decapitated by lies, decapitated by incomplete truth, decapitated by misinformation, decapitated by fake news. Why? Well, as I was doing a little research for the show today, it turns out that this individual supports some of the never-Trumpers within the Republican Party. And that is a sin one cannot abide by. And to hell if we have to throw capitalism under the bus to attack somebody who supports never-Trumpers, then so be it. To hell if we have to throw the truth under the bus in order to attack a never-Trumper, so be it. But we're not going to talk about Trump today. We're going to talk about economics. We're going to talk about finance. We're going to talk about reality. We're going to talk about some of the funnest stuff I know. Takeovers, mergers, activist investors. Stuff that is really fun. And I used to teach. But unfortunately, we're going to talk about it from the perspective of anger because of what Tucker Carlson has to say. So we're gonna launch into it. I'm gonna show you. This is a 10-minute 45 clip from Tucker. Of course, it'll take us probably an hour to watch it because I'm gonna interrupt him every 3 seconds. We'll go over this. By the way, I didn't have a lot of time today, so I haven't done all the research one could do to show how ignorant and just dishonest Tucker Carlson is. So I apologize for that. But in the hour or so of research I did do, I found plenty. So the producers of the Tucker Carlson show, the people who put this segment together, the people who run it like a documentary, shame on you. Shame on you for going after a good American, a good capitalist, for the sake of, for the sake of your leftist agenda. All right, here we go. Let's flip screens here. Show, there's Tucker Carlson today. And we will play it.
If you spent any time driving around America recently, you may have noticed that an awful lot of the country seems to have shriveled up and died.
An awful lot of America shriveled up and died. That's your experience with America? Now, it is true. He's going to give some examples of where that is certainly true. But is that your experience of America? Even today, with the mixed economy and all the problems, shriveled up and died? This is carnage in the streets of America out of Trump's inauguration address. And this is the agenda of this new right, the new conservatives. It's to tell us things are completely on their face, falling apart. America is shriveled up and died.
Take a trip on Route 2 in Maine sometime and count the boarded up paper mills and abandoned houses you see. Or head down Route 23 in Michigan or Ohio and consider the empty factories ringed with barbed wire. You'll see a lot of them.
Now, I'm curious whether Tucker's ever been down some of the roads in western Arkansas, or in Arizona, or in Texas. Have you ever been down Route 360 in Texas, around the Loop, or downtown Texas, Austin? 360 is in Austin. Or up in the northern corner of Austin, not far from the Dell headquarters and all the industries. As he compared Austin 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago with today. Yeah, certain parts of America are shriveling up and dying, and others are booming. I've talked about this often. Yes, if you're a steel worker sitting around waiting for the steel tariffs to bring back your job, then yes, you will shrivel up and die waiting. But you could get in your car and you could drive out to North Texas, where there is massive amount of construction, or where there is a shortage of jobs, or western Arkansas, or Arizona, or even, God forbid, California, where there are literally shortages of jobs. But according to Tucker Carlson, America is shriveling up and dying. All you have to do is take a drive in areas that have been shriveling up and dying for decades now. This is the Rust Belt that he is mentioning. The Rust Belt, which started shriveling, thank God, in the 1980s, as factories were shut down because they were inefficient, because they couldn't compete with the Japanese in those days. And where did all that freed up capital and freed up labor go? Because unemployment during the 1980s went down systematically as all these factories were shutting down all over the Midwest. Where did all those jobs, where did all that capital go? Well, it went to Silicon Valley, among many other places. It went to Austin, Texas. It went to Dallas and Houston. It went to Atlanta. Have you ever driven around Atlanta and all the construction and all the businesses in Atlanta? America is shriveling up and dying, Tucker Carlson? That is a Elizabeth Warren talking point. Well, no, I should say it's a Donald Trump talking point, but it ain't true.
Inside the coastal cities, scenes like this are everywhere.
Texas is not a coastal city. Arkansas is not a coastal city. North Dakota is not a coastal city. Atlanta and the entire much of the Southwest, where BMW and other German automakers are building plants, not coastal cities. Florida is booming. Booming because, by the way, Florida from an economic perspective, is the freest state in the union, freer than Texas. Less regulation, less taxes. Florida is booming. So this is just a lie. A lie that Trump started and is just being perpetuated in order to bring us to a state of hysteria. Oh, I guess Florida is coastal. I apologize. When he means coastal, by the way, he means the Northeast, those evil, liberal Northeasterners. He means California, Oregon, and Washington, where all those left-wing people, elites live, who don't care about the middle of the country. He doesn't mean Florida, which is kind of a southern state. Jacksonville, have you guys been to Jacksonville recently? Jacksonville, Florida is booming, has been booming for over a decade. Jacksonville. I think it's the largest port on the eastern shore. America is not shriveling and dying. There are lots of problems in America. God help us, there are a lot of problems in America. But this ain't it. Cherry picking a few places that indeed have shut down factories, have closed malls, cherry picking those to make what will turn out to be a horrific socialist leftist point is just dishonest. Fake news.
This is your country now. Shuttered car dealership.
This is your country now. This is your country now. Not my experience of my country. Well, I live in Puerto Rico, so maybe it is my experience of Puerto Rico. But it's not my experience of America. And I spent a lot of time driving in Minnesota, to rural Minnesota. Well, I know some factories that are doing quite well. Some shut down because they couldn't compete. They're out of business. Anyway, this is your America. Yeah, they're the auto
To
dealers
defunct
that are shut
restaurants
down.
across street from thrift stores and methadone clinics. That's America.
Thrift stores and methadone clinics, that's America.
Community after community, desiccated, empty husks with nothing left. Huge swaths of the United States look like that now.
I mean, none of that would stand up to any kind of statistic. And none of that is true. And of course, ever been to a ghost town? Ever been to a ghost town? You know, like in the 19th century where they mined for gold, or mined for copper, mined for something, and then the copper ran out and everybody left and moved on. I mean, if you drive along Route 69, Route 66, the route that goes kind of from the Midwest all the way to California before the highway systems, you drive through lots of ghost towns. Industry shut down, but the people didn't die. Americans don't shrivel up and die when a factory closes. Americans get up off their butt, climb onto the horse, and ride. Ride to where the jobs are. Today it's a lot easier. Today you can get into your automobile. You can take a plane. You can ride in a train and go to where the jobs are. If America is the way Tucker Carlson is describing it, it's because some Americans are not willing to take responsibility for their own lives because people like Tucker Carlson have told them they should not. And instead, they sit around, wait around for stuff to happen to them. That's not America. That's not what the American spirit is. Create your own destiny. That's what America is about. It only gets worse from here, guys.
So what happened? Well, a lot of things happened. Some of them are complicated and hard to change. But one of the big factors in this slow-moving disaster is the utter transformation of the way our leaders think about the American economy.
So it's the utter transformation of the way our leaders think about the American economy. And what is that transformation? It used to be that our leaders cared about the people. And now they're ruthlessly capitalist. He doesn't say that, but that's exactly what he means.
During the last Gilded Age, 125 years ago, America's ruling class may have been ostentatiously rich, and they were. Go to Newport, Rhode Island for proof, if you like. But it was still a recognizably American class. Tycoons accumulated fortunes, but they also felt some obligation to the country around them.
So Accumulating fortunes is not enough. This is typical leftist point. Accumulating fortune doesn't count. What matters is what you give back. And in the 19th century, Tucker's going to say, the tycoons gave back. They were real Americans. Today, the tycoons are, here it is. He doesn't say it, but what he means is globalists. They don't care about America. So they don't give back. And that's the problem. Really? Brandon and I would rip Tucker Carlson at anybody in a real debate. Tucker Carlson doesn't have a chance. He knows absolutely nothing about economics, about the economy, about America, about how jobs are created, about what's really going on in this country. He is a mouthpiece. He's a propaganda mouthpiece. And by the way, for those of you who wonder, I've debated dozens of people. I've done dozens of debates. So,
Steel tycoon Andrew Carnegie famously built stone libraries around the country.
Yeah, that's what makes him good. He built libraries rather than he actually reshaped the steel industry in this country, created millions and millions of jobs. I mean, thousands and thousands of jobs, and built this country by building its industry. That's what makes Carnegie special, not the libraries. Libraries are nice.
Edification of people beneath him. John D. Rockefeller and many other so-called robber barons set aside huge portions of their wealth, and in some cases their property, to make this country better.
That's what makes them good guys. This is the complete and utter bankruptcy of conservatives. That they think for a minute that what makes the so-called robber barons good guys, and the idea that, they didn't shut down factories, they didn't shut down towns, they were the good guys. They only created jobs and they were socially responsible. He sounds like Bernie Sanders. In the old days, the robber barons were socially responsible. The problem today is they're not socially responsible enough. All right.
Yellowstone, Acadia National Park, etc.
Oh, yeah, we got
Maybe
national
most
parks because of these
significantly,
guys.
in January of 1914, Henry Ford more than doubled the prevailing factory wage to a then remarkable $5 for an 8-hour day. Ford didn't have to do that, but his company was succeeding, and he thought he should.
Really? Oh, my God. I mean, this is the kind of fake history, not just fake news Tucker Carlson engages in, but fake history that he is providing us. Why did Ford double wages to $5 a day in 1914? What was he trying to do? Was he thinking, I mean, I don't know if you've read a little bit about Ford, but was Ford thinking, we're doing well, so we should share some of our prosperity with our workers? Is that what he was doing? No. What Ford actually did was raise wages to $5 an hour, fire his most unproductive workers, and attracted to himself, because he doubled wages, the best, most productive workers in the entire auto industry. What he did was raise wages so he could make more money. What he did is raise wages so he could attract the best, most productive people in an incredibly competitive market. In an incredibly competitive market for labor, what Ford did was maintain his best people, attract the best people, and fired the people who couldn't live up to $5 an hour. A day, $5 a day. So it's just nuttiness to present, the robber barons weren't robber barons, really. They were good guys because they did philanthropy and they paid their workers well. I mean, if you've read how Carnegie and many of these guys treated their workers, some of it is embarrassing to a defender of capitalism like me. I mean, they bought out of Pinkertons sometimes to shoot them. And yet, he's whitewashing that in order to make his point about how wonderful they were because today's industrialists, today's financiers are sheer evil. Why? At the end of the day, the reason is because they don't support Donald Trump.
Some historians trace the creation of the American middle class to that decision. Either way, it is nearly impossible to imagine a big company doing anything like that today. Attitudes are just too different.
Really? No big company today would raise wages. Amazon did not raise wages to $15 an hour minimum wage. They did. They raised them for all workers, $15 minimum wage at Amazon. They did that recently. Walmart has done it. Other companies in technology, it's done all the time. The idea that somehow today, because they're focused on, let Tucker Carlson tell you.
Average finance mogul looks at workers merely as cost to be reduced or eliminated entirely.
Which is funny when you think about what some of the great industrialists of the 19th century did and how they treated workers. Today, corporations, today's businesses, today's financiers, today's capitalists are far more worker-friendly. Far more worker-friendly than they were in the 19th century. I mean, it's such a joke. It is such a joke. But it's not a joke. This is purposeful lying, purposeful deception, purposeful misrepresentation of the truth. This is worse, as bad as the New York Times at its worst.
He isn't building a lot of public libraries these days. Instead, the model...
Really? All those philanthropists, they're not building anything? They're not contributing? I mean, American billionaires don't contribute anything? Where do you live, Tucker? Which America? I mean, you are spending too much time in New York, I think. But if you go, by the way, if you go in New York to the, to the ballet. Now, ballet, it's highfalutin stuff, but it's the ballet. Who built that ballet? Well, it's got a big sign on the front of the ballet. I love it because all those New York leftists, they have to pass through this and see this. But right on the New York ballet, it says in big type, donated by David Koch from the Koch brothers. All those leftists have to go and see the ballet knowing that it is made possible from a donation by David Koch, the man they hate more than anything else. Hey, Tucker, you don't live in America. You have no clue what America's like.
Ruthless economic efficiency. Buy a distressed company, outsource the jobs, liquidate the valuable assets, fire middle management, and once the smoke is cleared, dump what remains to the highest bidder.
And there's something wrong with all of that he just described? That's called creative destruction. That's called economic progress. That's called reassigning capital to its more productive use. That's called job creation. That's called job creation. Because by dismantling capital that's inefficient, by dismantling and destroying jobs that do not produce, one frees up the capital to create jobs elsewhere. And that's why there are more jobs today than ever before. That's why unemployment is so low today in America. Not because of Trump or Tucker Carlson, but because capitalists are deploying capital more and more and more efficiently. And that's why there were jobs in the 80s. As the Rust Belt was shutting down, jobs disappearing, going away. Exactly the process he just described. All of that happening. And at the same time, jobs appeared elsewhere. Many, many more jobs because unemployment was declining throughout. By the way, anybody really interested in understanding what I'm going to be talking about today and understanding why the fallacy, the complete and utter garbage that is everything that Tucker is just said and is going to say for the rest of the show, there's a movie I recommend. And in the movie depicts exactly this restructuring of America. And the movie actually represents what is really going on amazingly effectively. It's a little funny, can be a little vulgar here and there. And the hero of the movie, purposefully is played, purposefully in the sense that they put this actor there on purpose to make you want to ridicule it. Now Wall Street. Wall Street is the opposite. Wall Street depicts the opposite. Wall Street is a complete misunderstanding of what this process is. The movie is other people's money. Maybe the best movie ever made about finance. It is a great movie about finance. Not qua movie, I don't know if it's great, but qua finance, it's a great movie. The speeches there are brilliant. Danny DeVito's character is brilliant. And of course, the bad guy in the movie is Gregory Peck. So the good guy is DeVito. The bad guy is Gregory Peck. The bad guy represents Tucker Carlson. The good guy is me, represents me. My arguments about finance. And if you see that movie, you see why sometimes businesses have to be shut down. Workers have to be fired. Assets need to be sold to the highest bidder. And why? The existence of financiers that can do this, the existence of financiers that engage in this kind of activity is essential, crucial to a thriving economy, essential, crucial to capitalism. All right. Let's keep going with Tucker. We're only 2 minutes in. There's still 8 minutes. 8 minutes of lying and misrepresentation.
Asia. It's happened around the country. It has made a small number of people phenomenally rich.
Yeah, good.
One of them is a New York-based hedge fund manager called Paul Singer.
Paul Singer is a massive contributor to the Republican Party. And I think, from what I read, a never-Trumper. That is his real sin.
According to Forbes, has amassed a personal fortune of more than $3 billion. How has Singer made that money? Well, he made a lot of it by purchasing sovereign debt from financially distressed countries that were in trouble, usually at a massive discount. Once a country's economy regained some stability, Singer would bombard its government with lawsuits, a massive public relations campaign originating here in Washington sometimes, until he made his money back with interest. The practice is called vulture capitalism.
Now, notice that he's saying all this with a smirk and is horrible. Ugh. He buys distressed debts of countries that get into trouble. Somehow they get into trouble. What Paul Singer is known for doing, particularly famous for the Argentina debt, is buying debt of countries that have collapsed economically. And buying them for pennies on a dollar. Because they become socialist countries, and the economy's collapsed, and they won't pay. Or the market fear they won't pay. And what Peter Singer does is he forces them to pay. He uses the legal system. He uses the courts. Not thugs, not gangsters. The courts, the rule of law, to force countries that take on too much debt and then can't pay it, force them through legal means, to pay their debts. I mean, Peter Singer is a hero. A hero. By forcing countries, governments to live up to their obligations, by forcing countries, governments who are irresponsible to pay the debts that they've accumulated. I mean, Greece needed a Peter Singer to go after them. I don't think he did it because I don't think the rule of law would have applied in quite the same way in Europe. But he did go after Argentina. And he made a fortune doing it. Because while everybody else had given up on Argentina ever paying back its debt, Peter Singer forced them by using American courts, by freezing Argentinian assets in America to pay the debts that they took on. But Tucker Carlson doesn't see it that way. This is vulture capitalism. This is people taking advantage of, those weak countries. The weak countries that have borrowed money from people and won't pay it back. I mean, it really is disgusting. I mean, Singer is actually forcing government to live up to their obligations. Good for him. And he's done this in country after country after country. And they know now, that if they threaten not to pay their debts, if they threaten to default on their obligations, people like Peter Singer and other hedge fund managers will enter the market, buy up the debt, and use legal resources, use the rule of law to go after them and force them to do it. Indeed, in Argentina, he was basically responsible for, ultimately, the conviction of a president, Cristina. She's now the vice president. She came back. But she was convicted of fraud, partially related to these bonds, because she took out debt and then refused to pay. That's wrong. And we should be defending people who call it out as wrong. But no, the new conservative, the nationalist conservative, the Donald Trump conservatives of today, God forbid we should stand up for an entrepreneuring capitalist. Never. We're going to go with governments all the way, even the corrupt socialist ones.
Feeding off the carcass of a dying nation.
Carcass of a dying nation. How disgusting is that?
In some ways, it's not so different from what Singer and his firm, Elliott Management, have done in this country and to this country.
Now we get to it.
Over the past couple of decades, Elliott Management has made billions by buying large stakes in American companies, then firing workers, driving up short-term share prices, and in some cases taking government bailouts, insult to injury.
Now, how is it that by firing workers you raise short-term stock prices? It doesn't work that way. If you fire workers and by doing so sacrifice a long-term profitability of the company, then stock prices will go down. Stock prices reflect in a price today the expectations about future profits of the company. So if you're just firing workers to raise profitability right now at the expense of the future, your stock price will go down. There are lots of examples in history, lots of examples of companies cutting workers and the stock price going down, not up. Why going down? Because they've sacrificed long-term profits for short-term accounting gain. But again, Tucker doesn't understand how stock markets work. Tucker has no concept of how capitalism works. So for him, if you make money and you've cut workers, I mean, he's a socialist. A leftist, at least, if not a socialist.
Bloomberg News once described Singer as, quote, the world's most feared investor.
He is, because when he invests in your company, you better be on top of it. You better be efficient. You better be productive. You better be in a position to make money. Making money is a good thing. Making money is a sign of value creation. Making money is what creates the capital that employs people, ultimately. But it's not about employment. Lots of companies shrink to make more money by buying robots, for example. It's about making money. And the more wealth you create, the more jobs are created in the economy, even if not in your company. Again, it's such bogus economics. Somebody says conservatives are such boomers. What is boomers become this amazing insult now? I don't think Tucker's a boomer. I am, I guess. I'm at the tail end of the boomer generation.
Tells you a lot. No one's even pretending Paul Singer's tactics are good for anyone but Paul Singer.
Not true. I'm pretending. Hey, Paul Singer's tactics are good for America. The Paul Singers of the world are what keep America competitive. It's the Paul Singers of the world is what move the world forward. It's what make innovation possible. It's what frees up the capital for all the goodies, for all the things that makes your life possible, Tucker Carlson.
And his fund. Consider the case of Delphi, the automotive parts supplier.
Right,
During the last financial
Delphi.
crisis, a consortium of hedge funds, including Singer's Elliott Management, purchased Delphi.
Now, notice what he doesn't say. Notice what he doesn't say. He says, during the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, a consortium of hedge funds led by Paul Singer purchased Delphi. Now, how did they do that? Did they buy it stock on the market? How did they do that? Well, he's missing an important piece here. Delphi was bankrupt. Delphi was an auto parts maker. I'm going to give you the whole story rather than just the pieces that Tucker Carlson wants to give you, because that's what I do. I kind of try to be objective, try to give you facts rather than fake, false, biased, partial news. Delphi was an auto parts manufacturer. And until 1999, it was basically a part of GM. GM used it to make all the auto parts for its cars. In 1999, General Motors spun Delphi out with the idea of, one, raise capital by selling it into the public. It raised money. And secondly, with the idea that Delphi could now manufacture parts for lots of other car companies and therefore diversify and maybe become a more profitable, more successful company, not just dependent on General Motors. Well, it didn't work out quite that way. One of the things that was spun out with Delphi was the pension plans of the union and all the union wages and all the union problems that have crippled for decades the American auto industry. And in 2005, 6 years after it was spun out, and well before the financial crisis, I might note, 6 years after it was spun out from General Motors, it filed for bankruptcy. Bankruptcy. In 2008, it was still bankrupt as the financial crisis hit and auto sales plummeted. And the biggest crisis in American auto industry in history occurred. Delphi was on the verge of liquidation, on the verge of selling all its asset, firing all its workers, and shutting down completely. The only thing that was keeping it alive were payments from General Motors. Small payments. But by 2008, 2009, GM couldn't afford to do that. So the company was in bankruptcy, at which point Paul Singer bought its debt, took over that debt in bankruptcy, and in a sense, took control over the debt proceedings at that time. I'll tell you the rest of the story following Tucker.
Singer and the other funds at the helm, the company took billions of dollars in government bailouts paid
I'll get to the government bailout.
for by you. Obama's auto czar compared those tactics to extortion, but they continued anyway.
Obama's auto czar was the one who gave the bailout. Now, Delphi did not take, as far as I can tell, did not take a direct payment from the bailout of the auto industry. So here's the story. You've got Delphi bankrupt. You've got GM paying it a little bit of money, but GM running out of money, having no money. Paul Singer and a bunch of hedge funds buy its debt for pennies on the dollar, just like with those foreign countries. The government, in 2009 under Obama, sets up if you remember, what was it called? It was like the Save the Auto Industry Committee of government officials. Obama appointed a former private equity fund manager to run this entity, in charge of bailing out the auto industry. And they came in and they took over General Motors and started managing General Motors. They created, let me just see, I've got part of this history written down here. Let's see. Yeah, so GM is on the verge of bankruptcy. Delphi is basically on the verge of liquidation. Bush in 2008 had spent $17.4 billion to rescue GM and Chrysler with loans. And then Obama assembled this task force led by a Wall Street private equity guy by the name of Steven Ratner to oversee the bailout of the auto industry, to pour much more money in there, right? At some point in March of 2009, GM was supposed to give $150 million to Delphi based on just keeping it alive. And the reason GM wanted to keep Delphi alive is because the auto parts, without Delphi, GM was dead. It would have no auto parts. So GM was about to make a payment of $150 million to Delphi, and the task force said no. So within a couple of months, again, this is on the verge of liquidation, a private equity firm by the name of Platinum Equity, a group that I actually know. I know the founders, and I've been a Platinum Equity, a very, very successful private equity firm, actually bids to buy the assets. So they're going to buy the assets of Delphi. But nothing here can happen without the Treasury Department, without Obama's commission approving it. And in addition, Peter Singer and the other hedge funds say, wait a minute, Platinum is buying this company way too cheap. Way too cheap. So they come in and they make a higher offer. They bid more money for the company. And basically, right, they offer to exchange the debt, the loans that they have, for equity, for control over the company. And in July 2009, they cut a deal with GM that they will take over the company and will not be sold to Platinum. Now, GM provided financing at this point to this new company that's coming out of bankruptcy, right? Delphi comes out of bankruptcy, steered by these hedge funds, and GM provides them with financing. $1.7 billion of a direct investment in its equity. They get shares for the $1.7 billion. Now, where does GM get $1.7 billion? Because GM is on the verge of bankruptcy. GM gets the $1.7 billion from the $20 billion, I think, or however much it was. How much did from the massive pool of money that the Treasury gave them. So the Treasury lends money to GM. GM makes an investment with that money in Delphi, an investment that they got back with massive returns a few years later when Delphi goes public. Now, Peter Singer in the story is a hero. He saves Delphi. He actually pays the debt holders more than what they would have got if Platinum had taken it over. Yes, he gets government subsidized money, but the problem is not the hedge funds and Peter Singer. The problem is that the government subsidized money was going to GM to bail them out. The government should have never bailed them out. Anyway, I don't know if now at this point I'm boring you with all the details, but I just want to give you just a glimpse into the complexity involved here. Now, it's true that Delphi, in order to stay competitive, in order to actually become a competitive company, and Delphi exists today, Delphi is thriving. It just split into two companies of auto parts manufacturers. Delphi did a few things. One, it changed its official place of incorporation to the UK in order to take advantage of lower taxes. Second, it fired a lot of people. It moved assembly of some of the parts to China or to the UK or to other parts of the world. Indeed, Delphi today has factories, assemblies, offices in 24 countries around the world. It employs 150,000 people, of which it's hard to tell. I couldn't quite find the numbers, but about 10,000 in America, maybe more. Its headquarters is in the U.S., in Michigan. They still run the company from Michigan, even though they pay UK taxes. Now, Elliott, which is the fund, Paul Singer's fund, they made a fortune off of this. They made a lot of money because they bought it cheap and then they ran it well and they took it public. And we have an auto parts manufacturer who's selling parts to GM, who helped ultimately GM survive. Now, granted, GM should have been allowed to go bankrupt, and Delphi probably would have gone bankrupt with it. But to pull out Paul Singer was subsidized by U.S. bailout is, again, dishonest, partial information, dropping all context, just an attempt to slur and condemn somebody for what? For what? To go after somebody who is funding people who are never Trumpers. By the way, I get no money from Paul Singer. The Iron Man Institute has never gotten any money from Paul Singer, although I tried, but I never managed to get a meeting with him. So I have no love for Paul Singer because he supports me or anything like that. I would tell you if he did, because I don't mind being supported by people like Paul Singer. It's just, in this case, it's just not true. I happen to love what he does. I happen to love the kind of capitalist he is. I happen to love the process that is capitalism. Not the kind of wishy-washy, touchy-feely nationalist socialism of Tucker. I'm talking about capitalism, the beauty of change, the beauty of people using their minds to figure out solutions, to reallocate capital to its most productive use, to save companies, to destroy companies when they need to be destroyed. Watch other people's money. Tucker Carlson should watch other people's money. He could learn a lot from that movie.
Once they had the bailout money, the funds moved most of Delphi's jobs overseas and then either cut retiree pensions entirely or shifted the cost to taxpayers.
Again, not true. I mean, what do you do about this stuff? I mean, I know how many of you get mad at the New York Times, but this is Fox. Supposedly fair and balanced, and they give you real news. They're just as bad, if not worse, probably worse, than the New York Times. No, in bankruptcy, there is a government entity. Again, I have a file here somewhere with the name of this entity. But anyway, it's a government entity that basically guarantees corporate pension plans. Government shouldn't be doing that, but it does. And when a pension plan cannot live up to its promises in bankruptcy, when a firm is in bankruptcy, then often what happens is the government takes over that pension. And that's what happened here. It wasn't that they bilked them. It's that the government took over the pension plan. And yes, pensioners will get less money, and it's in the courts. They're suing. There's huge disputes about this. But for him just to throw out there like this, ignoring the actual evidence, what actually happened. The government took over those pension plans as part of this pension guarantee entity that the government has. And today, that's being, in the courts, as it should be. The pensioner said, no, the pension was fine, you should have kept it going, and the government saying, no, it was bankrupt. And there's a dispute, and there's a courts, and there's a rule of law, and we'll settle it. It had nothing to do with Paul Singer, had nothing to do with the hedge funds. Although I'm sure that as part of the bankruptcy negotiations, that was part of the consideration. What's going to happen to the pension plan? But again, Tucker is presenting it so one-sided, so ignoring the facts.
With later financial commitments at home and cheap factories abroad, Delphi's stock soared.
Yes, it did, because it was productive, because it was making money, because it was creating jobs. Maybe not in America, but it was creating jobs, and it was creating product, and it was selling it to GM and other auto companies. It was actually doing what you do under capitalism.
To investigative reporter Greg Palast, of the 29 Delphi plants in operation when the hedge fund started buying Delphi's debt.
When they were bankrupt. Notice they were bankrupt. He never says this. They started buying the debt when Delphi was in bankruptcy. All of those plants would have been shut down anyway, because Delphi was losing huge amounts of money and nobody wanted it. except Platinum, who was going to shut down all those plants. I know the guys at Platinum. They were going to shut down all those plants.
4 were still operating in the United States by 2012.
That's 4. That's more than 0.
That means tens of thousands of unionized and white-collar workers lost their jobs.
That's right, because they were unproductive, inefficient, didn't produce the product, and the company was bankrupt.
Paul Singer's hedge fund cashed out for more than $1 billion.
They made a lot of money.
See
Good
how
for
that
them.
works? Well, some countries, including the United Kingdom, have banned this kind of behavior. It bears no resemblance whatsoever to the capitalism we were promised in school.
I don't think that's true. I'm going to research this issue that the UK has banned this kind of behavior. I don't know how you ban it.
Creates nothing. It destroys entire cities. It couldn't be uglier or more destructive. So why is it still allowed in the United States?
You know who has a plan to stop it? You know who have a plan to stop it? Elizabeth Warren. I mean, I've said it all along, and Tucker has said this too. Elizabeth Warren is Tucker Carlson's candidate. He's 100% aligned with Elizabeth Warren's economic plan. She has a whole plan, you can find it on her website, to destroy private equity, to destroy the capacity of hedge funds and private equity funds to do exactly this wonderful thing of redeploying capital. All right. Somebody says, I know the owner of the Pistons. Yeah, I mean, Platinum Ventures, at the time at least, was 2 brothers. I think they came from Detroit. And I think they're Lebanese. Originally. And they moved to LA, and Platinum Ventures is in LA, and then they bought the Pistons to partially to be cool in Detroit. So they were pretty amazing, interesting guys. I mean, a lot of color and character. But anyway, let's go back to Tucker Carlson. We've only done 4 minutes. 4:44 out of 10:45. So there's still 6 minutes to go. Sorry, guys. Tom Gores. I knew Tom Gores. That's right. He's from Flint. So I've met Tom Gores on several occasions. I don't know that he would remember me, but he is a hard guy to forget.
Short answer, because people like Paul Singer have tremendous influence over our political process.
All right, so Gordon gives us a fact here. The Pension Benefits Guarantee Corporation, which is a government entity, agreed to take on $6.2 billion in pension liabilities from bankrupt auto supplier Delphi Corp. Now, Gordon probably found that in 3-minute Google search. Tucker Carlson has a huge staff of producers, researchers. We'll see some of their work in a minute. They couldn't have found that? Or is that not pertinent information when you're trying to, destroy the reputation of a human being? I'm furious. I really am angry. This is not I'm not pretending here. Because I love finance. I love financiers. And I love capitalism. And there's still a few areas where capitalism is allowed to function. In technology, somewhat. And in this kind of private equity, hostile takeover, restructuring of America, bankruptcy law in America is very healthy at the corporate level. And he's just attacking Paul Singer for no reason other than his own, Tucker's ignorance. But I don't even think it's ignorance. Because again, this doesn't take much research to figure out. This is just evil. This is just destroying another human being for the sake of destroying another human being. This is the kind of nihilism we often accuse the left of. And here's Tucker Carlson using the same tactics for the same purpose, nihilistic purpose of just tearing people down. Successful people. Good people. Oh, but people who are not for Trump. That's the real sin.
Himself was the second largest donor to the Republican Party in 2016. He's given millions to a super PAC that supports Republican senators. You may never have heard of Paul Singer, which tells you a lot in itself, but in Washington, he is rock star famous. And that
anybody who knows anything about politics and has been involved in politics and Republican fundraising knows about Paul Singer. I've known about him for over a decade. If you hang out in New York among Republicans, you know Paul Singer.
He's almost certainly paying a lower effective tax rate than your average fireman.
Bullshit. I mean, again, a talking point right out of Bernie Sanders. Right out of Bernie Sanders. Paul Singer pays a lower effective tax rate? No, he doesn't, Tucker. No, he doesn't. Not when you take into account corporate taxes. Not when you take into account the taxes he pays on his fees, which are salaries. I mean, that's all I can say. Yes, he pays a lower rate on his carried interest because it's a capital gains. But on the rest of his income, he pays a much higher rate than your plumber.
Just in case you're still wondering if our system is rigged. Oh, yeah, it is. Tonight, we want to tell you a little more about how Paul Singer does business. The story begins in a small town called Sidney, Nebraska.
All right, we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about Sidney, Nebraska, and this company that Paul Singer destroyed. You ready for this? All right, here we go.
6,282.
Kind of towns
2
that
hours
Tucker Carlson
outside
loves.
Denver. Sydney is the longtime home of the sporting goods retailer Cabela's, which sells fishing and hunting gear. In October of 2015, Singer's hedge fund disclosed an 11% stake in Cabela's and set about pushing the board to sell the company.
Know what he doesn't say. Again, partial information. It is true that in 2015, Paul Singer's accumulated 11% of the stock in Cabela's and pressured the board to do something. Why? Why did he accumulate the stock? And why the pressure? Because in the 2 years preceding 2015, from 2013 to 2015, again, you can find this online, not that hard to find. The stock price of Cabela's went down by 50%. 50%. The market was clearly indicating that Cabela's was not doing a good job. Yes, it was profitable. But in a world of online retail, in a world of Amazon, in a world in which people can shop, in a world where Cabela's competitor, Bass Pro, was more profitable, Cabela's stock was declining because people expected future profits to be in decline. And indeed, during this period, the Cabela's board considered many strategic options. Paul Singer saw an opportunity, buy the stock at a 50% drop, and hope or influence, make sure that one of the strategic options that increased the values of Cabela would be implemented. And indeed, there were many options, from buying another company, to grow, to selling, to restructuring. There was a whole array of options that the board considered. By the way, all of this is available, all this information is available online because you can find the SEC filings of Cabela's. You can find what they said about the merger and what they said about the stake that Paul Singer took in their company. By the way, Cabela's on the board was Cabela, somebody who's named Cabela, somebody who I guess is from this little town in Nebraska. But Tucker Carlson cares more about the town than the founder of the company, obviously.
Cabela's management, apparently fearing a long and costly fight with Singer, announced it would look for a buyer.
Now, why is that? How do we know that? That they feared a long and costly fight with Paul Singer? How do we know that they even... How do we know that they were worried about Paul Singer? How do we know that they didn't embrace Paul Singer? How do we know any of this? What evidence does Tucker Carlson present us? Does he interview the board of directors? You'll see in a minute. He does not. Does he interview the CEO? No, he does not. How do we know that Cabela's was unhappy and just appeased Paul Singer? How do we know this? Oh, because they're a small business and they're not financiers. And they're a good American company because they're based in a little American town. And a good American company in a little American town must be good and the evil financier from New York City has to be evil and bad. So we're going to assume that the good people in Nebraska tried to stand up to Paul Singer, but were afraid, intimidated, didn't want to spend the money on a legal suit, and just caved.
Now, at the time, Cabela's was a relatively healthy company. It was posting nearly $2 billion a year in gross profits.
It was, but why was its stock price 50% lower? Because it was at real risk, because of the changing retail industry, because of online businesses. Again, the stock market does not reflect your performance today. The stock price reflects your expected performance in the future. Tucker, you need a 101 finance class, and I have just the professor for you, me. So anytime, I'm available to teach you just a little bit of finance, because it would be helpful, given that you're commenting on stuff in finance. I got my PhD in this. I know this stuff. All right, Tucker's not listening. Maybe one of his producers would. Maybe you could forward this link to one of Tucker's producers.
Off $4 billion in revenue. There didn't seem to be any immediate need to sell.
Other than the stock price collapsing.
Sold anyway after being pushed. So 1 year after Singer entered the equation, Bass Pro Shops announced the purchase of Cabela's. The company's stock price surged. Within a week, literally a week, Paul Singer cashed out. He bought the stock for $38 a share. He sold it for $63 a share. His hedge fund made at least $90 million up front and likely more over time.
Great.
But in Sidney, Nebraska, it was a very different story. The residents of Sidney did not get rich. Oh, no, just the opposite. Their community was devastated, destroyed. The town lost nearly 2,000 jobs. Yep. A heartbreakingly familiar cascade began. People left, property values collapsed, and then people couldn't leave. They were trapped there. One of the last thriving small towns in this country.
One of the last thriving small towns in this country? Seriously, Tucker? One of the last thriving small towns in this country. Do you hear yourself even speak?
Went under. We recently sent 2 producers to Sidney, Nebraska to survey the wreckage there and to consider what happened. Our producers talked to more than a dozen former Cabela's employees. Almost all of them refused to speak to us on camera, fearful of legal retribution from the famously vicious Paul Singer. Off camera, they told us their story. Here it is.
Sidney is, it's a great place to be.
By the way, this guy's not off camera. I don't know what happened there.
This is Sidney, Nebraska.
Now, notice the appeal to emotion. This whole thing is an appeal to emotion. It's no facts, no evidence, no discussion of the net, whether more jobs were added or more jobs destroyed. Just Sidney, Nebraska lost 2,000 jobs. And it was planning on growing. And it's really, really sad. And we should really, really feel sorry. And this is such leftist propaganda. It's disgusting.
For decades, a sporting goods retailer, Cabela's, kept its headquarters in Sidney. As the company grew more prosperous,
even some country music on the back.
Cabela's was the keystone employer. Our motto forever was small town values big time opportunities.
But that motto was turned on its head when Elliott Management Corporation, that's a New York-based hedge fund, managed by billionaire Paul Singer, took an ownership stake in Cabela's.
When we got the news this company is coming in from New York City and buying a huge stake in Cabela's, that shakes things up.
Notice that all the interviews are with government employees, the mayor and some government employee. No board of directors, no CEO, no facts, no actual evidence that they were pushed into selling, pressured into selling, or anything similar to that.
Cabela's was making more than $1 billion a year. But Paul Singer's firm sensed it could make a quick buck by driving up the stock price by forcing a merger.
No, there's a reason why the stock price go up, because Bass Pro could use the resources of Cabela's more effectively than Cabela's did. So they were willing to pay more for it. What is the commenting going on about what? About me?
Once thriving town of Sydney lost everything.
I cried the second I got the phone call. I couldn't help it. I bawled.
That's how a longtime Cabela's employee reacted to news that she was losing her job.
I had something good going. That was my future.
Is anybody happy when they lose their job? No. Is it sometimes necessary for people to lose their jobs? Absolutely. Does capitalism cause people often to lose their jobs? Yeah. But it creates more jobs than are being destroyed. And does wealth, productivity, standard of living, quality of life go up overall? Yes. Again, this could be Richard Wolff.
I don't really know what my future is.
Probably looking at around 2,000 jobs.
2,000 jobs gone?
Yeah.
Sydney was devastated.
He ruined it. A good American town and just destroyed it.
He doesn't get to supply them with wood anymore.
The town's lumber yard. Before the merger, business was great.
We were just buried, with business.
Now his customer base has collapsed.
How many new homes have been built since Cabela's and Bass Pro merged?
In the city limits here, there have been one.
One house.
One house.
Before Paul Singer's hedge fund put Cabela's in its sights, Sydney was experiencing a building boom.
We're going to build a new housing subdivision to meet.
This is all a result of the fact that they weren't watching the stock price. If they were watching the stock price and they'd seen the stock price go in half in 2 years, then maybe they would have said, maybe things are not as good as we thought they were. Maybe the future is not as rosy as it should be. Because that's what stock prices tell you. They tell you what are the prospects long term.
All these great things were happening, and instead we are working our tails off to try to figure out a way to survive.
For the people of Sydney, it's been a disaster. Those who want to leave Sydney can't go. Housing values have collapsed, tethering them there. For those who want to stay, it's almost impossible to find a job.
How long did it take you to find a new job?
It took me just shy of 5 months.
And is it as good as your old job?
Of course not.
Not even close.
Wouldn't have
As
interviewed
Sydney
you if it was
collapsed,
better.
Wall Street cashed in. Paul Singer's hedge fund sold out before the merger was even complete. The fund made nearly $100 million.
Good for them.
They don't care about rural Nebraska,
Of course they
small
don't.
town.
I hope Paul Singer
Why would they care about rural Nebraska in a small town? It's not their job. It's not their job.
is proud of what he did. If
Sure
money
he
is
is.
that big of a god to him, it's a pretty sick human being.
Well, as we were doing that story, we were warned repeatedly by people around Washington, don't criticize Paul Singer.
Oh my
That's
God,
not a
'cause
good
he's gonna
idea.
come
And
after you.
as that package played, I got the following text from a very well-known person in Washington. Holy smokes, I can't believe you're doing this. I'm afraid of Paul Singer. We'll see what happens. Meanwhile, this are everywhere.
Oops. All right. Well, that's enough, I think. A few things about Cabela, just so you know. Let's see. Yeah, since the purchase, Bass Pro has increased the number of employees at its headquarters, which I'm sure in a small town somewhere. I don't know where Bass Pro is located. We could look that up. Shareholders made a lot of money. Employees who owned stock made a lot of money on the sale. The stock price doubled. It went half, and then because of the sale, it doubled. So everybody who was in the stock, most of the employees, I'm sure the board members made a lot of money. I'm sure the CEO made a lot of money. But I'm sure a lot of the employees, I'm sure their pension plan was heavily invested in their own stock, which made a lot of money. Nobody ever mentions any of those things. Any of those things. He doesn't mention the fact that at no time did Paul Singer sit on the board of directors of Cabela, and that the jobs didn't disappear. They moved from this little town in Nebraska to Springfield, Missouri. I guess Springfield is not a little town. It's a big place, but it's not it's not New York. It's not even Denver. It's Springfield, Missouri. And all those jobs were recreated in Springfield, Missouri. So, yeah, it's sad for people in Sydney. Get on with life. I'm sure most of the people in Sydney have. They're Americans. They're not the kind of pathetic, miserable, moany, mopey, sitting around waiting for reality, the good things to happen to them people that Tucker Carlson assumes they are. No, they're Americans. So they find new jobs, or they move out of town. They move to a different town. Lots of small towns have died. Not because of Paul Singer, but because the world is not static. Do you know who some of the biggest opponents to capitalism were in the 19th century? It was conservatives. Maybe not conservatives in England as much, but conservatives in places like Germany, who saw small towns disappearing. People going into the cities. I mean, talk about destruction of small towns. Whoa. Europe in the 19th century decimated its small towns. People went into the city, just like right now in China. Small towns are being decimated by a movement into the mega cities. And it was conservative philosophers, thinkers, intellectuals, commentators in the media who bemoaned the loss of the communal German spirit in the small little town and how capitalism was destroying the soul of the German people and how money was becoming a god. I mean, this was the same language. And of course, blaming the Jews for all of this. This is the same kind of language that the conservatives and the Marxists use, and it's no different today. If Tucker Carlson is a conservative, then there is no difference. There's no difference between him and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and the Marxist left. Same people, same ideology, same viewpoint, same way of delivering information through emotion, through stories, devoid of fact, indeed, the opposite. Distorted, partial facts, lies, misrepresentations. All right, so let's look at some of the Super Chat questions we have. Don't ask any more because we've got enough here. So I'm going to look for ones that are more related to the topic. We'll start with those. Factories leaving America for other countries. Isn't this a mixed economy problem? Without labor regulations such as minimum wage, who in their right mind would build a factory out of America? Well, no, not completely. Factory leaving America is partially a consequence of a mixed economy. A large extent, it's wage regulation, not the minimum wage, because nobody pays minimum wage in factories, but it's all the benefits you have to pay, all the massive amounts of benefits that companies have to pay, and you can't fire them. You can't fire employees in many states. And there's just a lot of mixed economy regulations that makes the cost of labor very, very high. But it's not just that. You know, one of the reasons you open a factory up in a different country is because people in different countries might have different skills sets than Americans. For example, if you want to open up a factory that requires or it might be that the supply chain is somewhere else. So, for example, if you need fine toolery, precision tools, well, it might be more effective to build a factory in Germany than it is in the U.S., or for that matter, in China. China and Germany have a better fine tools industry than the United States. If you want to build a car parts manufacturer, it might be better to do so in China because it's easier to get the product to Japan, a huge manufacturer of automobiles. And if we didn't have a mixed economy, I think at least one, maybe all three of the U.S. auto companies would be bankrupt. They wouldn't be an American auto industry. So what? I mean, I think that would be a positive. There's no reason we have to make cars in America. Apple has often said, or a friend of mine in Amazon and other people in Silicon Valley tell me, that one of the reasons you go to China is not because of labor costs, but the quantity of labor. You just can't find 100,000 engineers in the U.S., but you can find 100,000 engineers in China. So there might be, or in India, or in other places. So there might be lots of reasons why you relocate a factory outside of America, even if America is completely free. And the ideal is a free flow of capital and goods across all countries. The ideal is real globalization. And we were heading in that direction slowly before Trump. I mean, tariffs globally were declining. Restrictions in China on trade were declining. In every country, it was in decline. The world had the lowest tariffs it had ever seen, at least since the 19th century. Until recently. Right? All right, let's see. Does Tucker think work and wages are rights? Maybe. I wouldn't be surprised. He's come out for, I think, the $15 minimum. Maybe not. But he's come out for Elizabeth Warren's economic plans. So I don't know if he's used their rights, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does. To humor Tucker and Yang, will work at displacement be different if it's from AI, which isn't a technology to help humans along, but fully replace them? No, I don't think it will be different, because the point of technology is to displace human beings. And you can see that most obviously in agriculture. So almost no Americans work in agriculture today because it's been automated, because the machines replaced human beings. Now, what has that done? It's allowed farmers to come into the city and get jobs that pay a lot more than farming did. And it's allowed wealth to be created. It's allowed farmers to have time to become high-tech entrepreneurs, to become artists, or to generally do what they want to do rather than farm. So technology always has displaced human beings, not helped them in a sense. And what it's done is it's created wealth. And that wealth creates more jobs. That's what wealth does. Capitalism always creates more jobs than there are people. So machines, AI, robot, all of these things will create more jobs than they displace. Always have and always will. Okay. What is the difference between law and regulation? And or what should it be? So the difference should be, I think today, it's to a large extent laws are something that Congress passes and then that embody regulations, and then regulations are to a large extent written by agencies, not even by Congress, which is even worse. But the bigger issue is laws are there to protect rights. Laws are written explicitly to protect you from rights violations and to penalize, primarily to penalize the rights violator. So they're there to define rights and to penalize those that violate those rights. Regulations are there to control your behavior before, without any reason to think that you're violating rights. That is, it's to regulate your behavior per se. It's almost always preemptive. It's before any violation of rights has happened. So regulations are controls over behavior, are controls over action, a violation of rights. And they are almost always preemptive. And therefore, they shouldn't exist. I really enjoyed the movie version of We the Living. Is the Fountainhead movie just as good? I'm almost done with the book. No, We the Living movie is actually better than The Fountainhead in my view. But The Fountainhead's still worth watching. It's just not as good as We the Living, I think. As a movie, core movie. It's good, just not as good. All right. Let's see. Could you do a movie review of the 1992 version of The Last of the Mohican like you did with Hombre? Yeah, I will. It's one of my favorite movies, so I really enjoy that movie a lot. And so I'll do a movie review. Now that you've asked, I'll try to do it. I did get a lot of money for the Hombre once. I don't know if you're promising me a lot of money for that. All right, I'm taking a secular course of early Christian history. We're surprised to learn there were no hospitals in pre-Christian Western civilization like Rome, where weakness was seen as a drag on culture, thoughts. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if there were no. I don't know if there were no hospitals in Jewish society which didn't have that view. So, it is true that Christians were particularly concerned and engaged with those who were meek, sick, dying, poor. That was the shtick. That was Christianity's appeal. That was Christianity's. It was the sacrifice of the able to those who cannot. Somebody writes, I should do a debate with Tucker. I mean, he's never going to debate me. He's never going to debate me. I would love to do a debate with Tucker, but Tucker will not debate me. I will guarantee you that. Yeah, Chris writes, yeah, exactly. Hippocrates, I mean, the Greeks had hospitals. Thank you, Chris. I should have thought of that. The Greeks had hospitals. So it's just not true that there were no hospitals until Christianity. I mean, Hippocrates was the first physician. So, no, obviously that's wrong. I think in Persian culture there were hospitals. So, no, I just don't see that. Now, it's true, maybe in Rome there were no hospitals. But I can't believe that we know that there were hospitals in Greece, and it's quite possible there were hospitals in Judaism, in a Jewish country. Tucker would not debate me. There's no way Tucker would agree to debate. He never has, and he never will. He won't even have me on his show. He's that much of a coward. And, that's true of many people at Fox, Hannity and others. They won't have me on the show. Not because I'm not articulate. Neil Cavuto said that I do some of the best television that anybody does when I'm on TV. But these guys will not have me on because they're cowards. And Tucker would never go on stage with me and debate me. He's smart in a clever kind of way, but he doesn't know anything. And philosophically, he's thoroughly corrupt. Thoroughly corrupt. And it would be fun to show how corrupt he really is. Now, he's had Amy Peikoff on the show a few times. Good for him, but he won't have me. And there's a reason. There's a reason. Quick thoughts on Daily Wire advocating the banning of porn. I didn't know the Daily Wire was doing that. It doesn't surprise me. They are religious, conservative, and some of them nationalists. So it doesn't surprise me that they want to ban porn. They want to regulate the morality of the people. Ayn Rand always said, the right wants to regulate your bedroom. They want to regulate your spirit. They want to regulate your spiritual values. The left, why? Because they think that's important. They don't want to regulate the economy because they don't think that's important. And the left wants to regulate economics because they think that's important, and they don't think spiritual is important, so they don't want to regulate that. This guy on the chat, so he replies, and now he puts, Tucker would absolutely, in all caps, debate you. How do you know this? People talk as if they know something. Yes, he's debated weaklings. He's debated all kinds of people, but he will not debate me. Even if I offer him money, he will not debate me. So I know this, right? Because I actually do debates all the time. And I approach people and ask them to debate me. Is it moral for law firms to advertise on TV for clients for personal injury or class action lawsuits? It seems like they are pandering to people's victim mentalities. Yeah, it's moral to do it. That's the business that they're in. Now, you could argue, is it moral for them to be in the business? But it's the business that they're in, and there is a role for personal injury lawyers. Class action lawsuits is questionable whether class actions should be allowed. But to sue companies, sue corporations, sue people for bad behavior, if it's moral for them to engage in it, it's moral for them to advertise. Now, maybe some of the advertising is immoral because it panders. Somebody says, Tucker talks to Amy, why wouldn't he talk to you? You'll have to ask Tucker, but he won't. Maybe because I would, I think Amy's patient with Tucker. I think she's good, but she's patient. I would be impatient. So they know me. They all, there we go. JV, who's been defending Tucker the whole time, and on the chat, and JV, who said that Tucker would absolutely debate me without any question, now writes, radical capitalist equal Jew. Well, there you go. The anti-Semites always appear in my chat, but it's truly fascinating to watch, and they're all consistently the same. Somebody's in the super chat is saying, Greeks had medicine, but it was for the elites aristocracy, not for the people who couldn't care for themselves. Those who were sick were left behind. That's the difference. That might be true. I think all citizens of Athens got access to medicine. You had to be a citizen of Athens. So yes, slaves, women who were not citizens might have not been treated as well. But Christianity is about the meek. And you can see why it has a certain level of appeal. Yeah, JV says he doesn't like Jews because they are consistently corrupt. All right, guys. And Ben Shapiro says, okay, Boomer. All right, they've all come. It's time for me to go. The anti-Semites are in the room. It's time for me to appear. By the way, one of these days, we're going to do a show on Fuentes, the latest alt-right superstar anti-Semitic weirdo. And we're gonna do that soon. Hope you enjoyed this show. I can't tell you, I was energized because I really hate this guy, Tucker Carlson, and the kind of garbage he puts out there. And and I will see you all maybe tomorrow. I don't know if we've got an Amy and Yaron show tomorrow. We might have a Yaron and Amy show tomorrow. That would be fun. So we could do that. All right, guys. Have a great evening. I'll see you tomorrow, one way or the other, or some other time this week. If not tomorrow, I will advertise on Twitter and Facebook when I know for sure. All right, guys. Bye. Have a great evening.